everybody, welcome to the first installment of my dialing in series for AMPLITUBE 5, which is IK Multimedia's new guitar modeling software. Now, anybody who follows my channel will know that I have a dialing in series for the Line 6 Helix and HX Stomp and Pod Go that has become quite popular over the years, and I had a lot of requests after doing a video maybe a couple weeks ago, basically the day AMPLITUBE 5 was released. I put kind of my first impressions video out, and the video's done quite well. I've got a lot of great comments from it. The folks at IK Multimedia reached out, said they enjoyed the video, and I had a bunch of requests to do a dialing in style video series for AMPLITUBE, and I thought, you know what, this could be fun. I've been enjoying AMPLITUBE 5. So I thought I would kick it off with a look at the MiniPlex 20. It's a new amplifier that is included with AMPLITUBE 5. And it's a model of the FRIEDMAN Pink Taco, which is a 20-watt EL84 based guitar amp. Now, I wanted to take you through how I would dial in my sounds within AMPLITUBE if I was working in the studio or even setting up something for live playing, and give you a few of the tips that I would normally use. And a lot of these tips you'll see throughout any presets I create and are going to be similar to the approach that I've taken with a lot of my Line 6 Helix presets, which a lot of folks, many folks have told me has worked so well for them. So without further ado, let's jump over to AMPLITUBE 5. So here we are, I'm in Cubase 11 Pro, and I have this set up as a VST plugin. Now, I'm not going to go in detail in all of what the capabilities in AMPLITUBE 5 are. It is a very in-depth piece of software. I kind of dove into a lot of those things in my first video about it. But what I want to do here is show a typical way that I would work with two different presets. I have Pink Taco Crunch and then a Pink Taco Lead. And then later I'm also going to show you a little snippet of where I used these exact tones in a mix without any post-processing after the fact. Only what you see done within AMPLITUBE 5 here, okay? So we have all these abilities for very complex routing, wet, dry, wet, multiple amps, multiple cabs. But you know, for a lot of what I do, I try to keep my signal path very simple and very straight ahead, and maybe in the studio use those sounds to layer more rather than going for this big wall of sound within one preset. So that's what I've done here. So I've started off, if you look at my signal path here, I've started off with the MiniPlex 20. With these particular settings we'll talk about in a second, going into the 412 closed vintage cab, all right? And the speakers that I'm using in that, for all four of them, are the Brit Green, which is a Celestion Greenback model, okay? So that's what I've chosen. I have that going into a final output section, which is going to use the EQ81 and the Black 76. Now these are models of a Neve 1081 EQ and a U-Audio 1176 compressor. These are two of my favorite tools to use, and a lot of folks will question me on this because I got it when I did my Helix videos. And anybody who watches my Helix dialing in series knows that oftentimes at the end of my presets, I have a studio compressor and some sort of an equalizer. And I kind of call it my little mastering section, where I like to glue the tone together, get it nice and unified, let's call it. I don't know if that's the right term, but for it to sit in a mix better. It's not necessarily that these particular processes are going to be doing very heavy-handed things, but they're going to be used more like a mastering engineer would use them in a very subtle way to kind of glue the sound together. And I get a lot of people say, well, you know, if you're using effects like delay and reverb, you should never put a compressor after it. And you know, that might be true in some scenarios, but you'll see in the way that I use it here, I get away with it. And I hope you agree that it's going to actually improve the tone quite a bit, but in a subtle way, if that makes sense. And you know, if you don't like it, you can always just come over here and turn them off. And we'll take a look a little more in depth. So what I started with here on the settings for my crunch tone, I had the gain structure switch here. A lot of folks might wonder what this is. This is a gain structure switch that gives us 3 different levels of gain, and I'll give you an example of how that works in a second. In the middle, it seems to be the least amount of gain. Over to the right is sort of mid amount of gain, and then over to the left is the most amount of gain. And other than that, we have very typical controls: bass, middle, treble, master, and gain. So the settings I ended up with were about 6 on the bass, just under 6 on the middle, right around 6 on the treble, 8 on the master, and about 7 on the gain. Now, let's do this. I'm going to shut off my final little end mastering section with my Neve EQ and my 1176 compressor, because that will give us this. Now, let's take a look going into our speaker cab. What I did is I used 2 microphones. A very classic, typical setup that I really enjoy is combining a Shure SM57 with a Royer R121. And I have owned these microphones in my own personal collection in real life and have recorded many albums with them. So I'm pretty intimately familiar with the sound of these, and it's a very classic combination to mix these two together. So we have our little mixer here that shows how we have things set up. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute the room mics and mute the SM57. And we're going to listen just to the Royer R121, which is called the Ribbon 121. And we'll go over to our VRR tech here to sort of see where I have it placed. I have it sort of off axis slightly and back just a little bit. I don't know how this corresponds to inches in real life, but I just used my ear. Now, what this sounds like, so this is without the room mics, without the SM57 mixed in, and without my little mastering section at the end, with these particular settings on the amp, this is what that sounds like. Nothing wrong with that tone, might be a little bit on the dark side of things. But very nice and very typical to what a Royer 121 ribbon mic would sound like in real life when put on a similar cab in a situation like this. All right, so let's do this then. Let's go over now, mute that, and we'll kind of listen to what I have on the 57. Now, what you'll notice here is that the 57 is put in a place where a lot of folks might say, why'd you put it there? Very close to the speaker and very close to the center of the cone, which is going to give a fairly harsh abrasive sound, but you'll notice it was kind of not very loud. I have this setting at minus 16.1 dB. Let me just raise that to like -5 so we can hear what's going on here. So not a sound I would like on its own, but what I've done with this, put it back to where it was, is I've combined that with the Royer ribbon mic at -4.8. So the vast majority of the tone of what we're hearing here is going to be the ribbon mic by itself, which was this. Can really hear the difference in tone. It's a quieter version of the 57. I have them also both at the 45-degree angle setting, which is going to be angling the mic in towards the cab. Okay, so you're not, even with the 57, it's not going to be such a direct hit from that sort of being close to the center of the cone. But now if I combine these two mics together, if I mute the 57, do you hear how I just sneak it in underneath the ribbon mic to give it that little bit of bite and edge? So on its own, no, it's not going to necessarily sound great or work, but I put it there for a very particular purpose to just sneak it in with the ribbon mic, and it sounds again like this. Without the 57. So I was really liking what that did to it. Now, I'm a big fan of having some sort of reverb, especially when we're using modelers. You know, when we're plugging in direct here, we're getting no room sound whatsoever. If I had a microphone set up in front of a real guitar amp, the room that I'm in is going to contribute something to the sound. The ambient qualities of that room are going to bleed onto the microphone. And that's why the IK Multimedia folk have done such a wonderful job here with giving us this room mic. So on the room mics, you can see that I'm using the Condenser 87, okay, set at this width, and I find that this just adds in. And we can go over to our mixer here and just kind of put that in. Let's solo that, see what we... So I don't have a lot of it in there. Here's the dry sound without it. Here's what happens when I put it in. So you hear just a little bit of ambience added from those room mics, and I really like the way that sounded. So that's the bulk of my tone that I used in this upcoming performance video. So nice stuff. All right, now what I did in my little, and we also have our other mixer tab here where we can control the room and the different microphones. We can even pan those microphones out left and right to get a stereo spread out of them. Now, what I want to do is come to my end effects processors here. So we're going to shut these off individually. Here's our sound like we've been hearing it without those. Here's what happens when I bring the 1176 in. Again, without, with. What you'll notice is with the 1176, I have it set to a compression ratio of 4:1. The attack is over here around 9 o'clock, and the release is set quite high over here around 3 o'clock. Now, with the 1176, the more you turn up the input control, the more compression you're going to get. And this little meter up here is showing how many dB of gain reduction we get. So if you crank this up, you're going to have tons of gain reduction, and you'll have to lower the output to compensate. Otherwise, you'll get too hot a signal coming out. But if you notice when I'm playing, watch the gain reduction meter here. I have it set for only about 1 dB of gain reduction, which just gives me that little glue setting that I want, that nice little bit of glue to the sound. Again, if I turn that off, so I'm not using it like a sledgehammer, I'm using it very subtly just to give that nice sort of mastering glue to it. Now, when we come over to the EQ81, what I've done with it is I've cranked a lot of input into it. And what that's designed to do is to have the EQ add its own kind of non-linear distortion, much in the way a mastering engineer might use it to sweeten the sound up. But again, what I need to do is pull the output down, so I'm hitting the front end of the EQ harder, but controlling my overall output level by bringing the output down. So that's a trick I really like to use. Now, if you also notice, I have this set, the low shelf, at about 330 hertz, and I just take a little tiny bit of that off, minus 1.1 dB, all right? The mid frequencies I haven't touched, and the high frequencies I haven't touched. I do have it set for a high shelf of 3.3 or 3,300 hertz, and I have that cranked up by 0.5 dB. So again, extremely subtle. I also have a high pass filter set at 100 hertz to just keep the low end under control. So here it is with these subtle settings. Here's the sound without that, but with the 1176. Now we'll bring the EQ81 in. Now, one thing you notice, because I have more output coming out of that, I'm now hitting the compressor harder. So what I need to do is pull my input back a little bit so that I get back to where I have my 1176 only doing about 1 dB of gain reduction. Now if I turn both of those off, we get this. Now you'll have to listen on a good set of headphones or a good set of speakers to really hear the subtle differences here. But I find that that little mastering section at the end really works to just glue it together and give it a more polished sound. Let's move on to the lead sound now. So here we are over at my Pink Taco lead sound. So what I have, you'll see a little bit different setting. My gain structure switches all the way to the left now for the higher gain settings. My bass is at 8. My middle is at 7, treble is around 7, master is just above 6, and gain is at 8, because I'm going for a more searing tone quality to this. I also added some delay to it after the fact. So what I used was the T-Rex replica copy. Now I'm not sure totally if this is included with AMPLITUBE 5. I have AMPLITUBE 5 Max, but if you guys need to buy these separately, you can go into the custom shop and add these to your own system. So what I ended up with was syncing it, the tempo to my DAW. I set the echo right here, just under noon, level just above noon. Tempo is going to sync to my DAW, and the sort of feedback repeats around 9 o'clock, and I'll show you what that sounds like in a second. As far as the microphone positioning, placement, and everything, I believe I didn't touch anything. These are all the same settings as I had in the previous preset. Now, on the master bus, again, I'm back to having my 1176 and my EQ81 at extremely similar settings, if not identical. I don't really believe I touched those. So we'll turn that off for now. We will turn off the replica delay, and what we end up with the microphones and these settings on the MiniPlex 20, okay, just with that little bit of room reverb. Let's turn on our delay. It's really starting to come together, and that fit really nice in the mix. Now let's come over to our mastering section again, and I'm going to turn this on again. Let's go one at a time here. So this is without either of them. We'll bring the black 76 in. Now I'll bring the EQ81 in. So again, without that mastering section, it's this. With it. All right. That's the finished product on those two different presets. Now I'm going to have those available for download from my website. I will have a link to it below, and you can go directly to my website, download these, and use them yourself, no charge, totally free. But what I want you to do is listen to these in the mix now. So what I've done here is I've used my Vigier Excalibur with a DiMarzio Tone Zone pickup in the bridge, and I have played a rhythm part using my Pink Taco Crunch Tone, doubled it, panned it hard left and right, and then did one lead up the center with the Pink Taco lead preset, and that's what this sounded like. All right, what'd you guys think? I thought it worked kind of nice. That was a very quick thing I threw together, really quick mix and everything. Sort of a 1 or 2 take little noodles over the rhythm for the lead part. But I really liked the way this sounded, and I really think the folks at IK Multimedia knocked it out of the park with all of these models that I'm using, from the microphone, speakers, cabs, the EQs and compression, and the FRIEDMAN MiniPlex 20, a really great amp model. So you guys can grab a copy of AMPLITUBE 5 if you like this. Go download the free presets, and I'm gonna have more like this coming. Hopefully this will be a more regular series as I have time to do it for all you AMPLITUBE users who've been hitting me up wanting me to do something similar to this. So I hope that was enjoyable. I hope you guys liked how I handled that, and I hope you like the outcome. And again, you know, I am one of these people who never says that everything I do is the only way. Some people are, you know, will handle this very different. Maybe they don't like the little mastering stuff at the end. You can shut it off. You can adjust things to your taste, but hopefully this gives you a starting point and a little bit of insight into how we can use the amazing tools we have in AMPLITUBE 5 to come up with some really good tones. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please like the video, share it with anybody who you think would get use out of it, and please subscribe to my channel for a lot more content coming up. Hit the little bell notification so that you get notified when I do put that content out. And again, thanks so much for your time, guys. I really appreciate you sharing it with me, and I hope that was helpful, and I hope you enjoyed. I'll be back soon with some more content. Ciao for now.